let's say I'm the leader of the process here, the operation, and I want to support the content manager. One of the pitfalls I could see, just to round out the whole, what could be some of the common challenges here. One of the pitfalls I could see is that I may not understand the capacity that's needed for the content manager. How do I could totally underestimate that. How could I figure out what is needed for the content manager, or how do I keep an eye on that? How do I support them?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that happens often. I mean, I think you need to break down your content strategy into the smallest parts so you really understand what you're asking. I think a lot of times when people say, okay, our content needs to be industry focused and persona focused, and we need to have 3 tiers and different levels of automation, and what you're talking about might be like 40 or 50 sequences all of a sudden. And it's not, again, it's not obvious if it's not your day to day, but if you're asking someone to create and manage 40 or 50 sequences, I mean, that's a lot of work. And so I think really itemizing exactly what the ask is and documenting how many hours that's going to take to do it well. I mean, I think that would be the job of the
They got to
solution
experiment,
owner.
right? They got to experiment.
Absolutely.
Let's just say from a content, give us some numbers here. And I realize that when we go into organizations, we give people specific information after we assess, like, hey, this is what you got going on, this is what you need, right? But like if I'm watching this and I'm thinking, well, we're a startup organization, like how many hours should a content manager allocate to our sales engagement? What about if I'm a mid-market? What if I've got a team of 100 plus reps? Like how much should we be allocating? And there's a lot of complexities here. So I know I'm putting you on the spot because if I've got over 100 salespeople or 500 salespeople, and then you got multiple teams, and then you got multiple industries that you're reaching out to, and so the whole content supply chain just goes and really it just blossoms because there's so much to think about. So I'm not holding you to whatever Erica says, folks. Like you don't take that and say, okay, 10 hours and we're good. All right, there needs to be discovery, but someone's got to start somewhere, and you got to test it, and you got to figure that out, what it is for you.
Yeah, I think another really important thing to note would be regions, right? If we're only talking about, let's say, North America, and we're talking about, 200 or 300 people or reps in an org, I mean, that's easily a full-time job for a content manager. It could be, too, that content manager could also do some writing and that the reps would also contribute to do some writing. And I think that's kind of the most common setup that we see is that there is a full-time person doing content management that's also responsible for writing or delegating the writing to the individual teams or the individual team managers. And so I would say that's pretty common in an organization of 200 or 300 reps. Once you get into the 300, 400, 500 reps, I think it's a full-time job just for a content manager. And again, this is assuming that you have a comprehensive content strategy that really incorporates the full life cycle of content. So you're A/B testing, you're creating quarterly sales plays, you're keeping up with your evergreen sequences, you might have events, you're going to have industry and persona-based sequences as well. The one full-time headcount for a team of 300 to 500 is reasonable. If you have, let's say, a smaller team or a startup and you're managing a team of, let's say, 10 to 15 reps and you're a single manager, I think it's fair to be able to test the function of a content manager to say, okay, that could be the team manager and it could be, 10 hours a week that they're really dedicating to this content process. Over time, once you start to operationalize it, it could be fewer hours, and that would assume that the reps would be very involved in the content creation process too. I think another important variable there is the complexity of your solution or your product, right? So if you're only selling like one platform and there's 10 or 15 reps, you're probably going to share sequences. But if you're, a global enterprise org and you're selling 20 or 30 different solutions, managing that content and creating that content is a totally different story. So there's so many variables, and I wish we had some algorithm where we could just plug in all of these variables and it would just spit out an answer of a good starting point. But we spend dozens of hours doing discovery just to be able to make specific recommendations. So I think I did the best I can, Theron, with that. With that
no, it's good.
Quick
I think people just want to know, like, hey, like, what does it really take? And just to encourage you, everyone's trying to figure that out. And it takes some experimenting, but I think giving some baselines there to start with is really, really helpful for folks. So, no, I think that's great. Thank you for doing that. Any other, advice around, like, if you're if you're the leader, how can you best support this function?
I think, especially in the first year, just giving a lot of space for that content manager to give feedback, to say, hey, we first estimated that this would take 10 hours a week. In reality, I'm spending 20 or 25 hours a week. So either how can we rethink our strategy so that it fits more in this 10 hours a week, or how can I get more support? Also to kind of be able to measure and say, when it gets to be this amount of work, we are going to get another person on board to help support this function. And so just to be able to have parameters around that, about what's expected, and then in addition to that, having regular check-ins with whoever's performing that function, allowing for some trial and error there, I think is really important.